The Lonely Mile. Chapter 1. The Commute. Emily's morning routine was always the same. She would wake up early, brew a strong cup of coffee, and take her time to dress in clothes that made her feel both comfortable and presentable. Today, however, there was an added sense of urgency. The previous night had been another nightmare, filled with images of her ex-boyfriend's face twisted in rage as he whispered threatening words. She had hoped the break-up would be a clean cut, but it seemed to be anything but that. Her thoughts were clouded, and she struggled to focus on anything else as she made her way out the door. Stepping onto the bus that traveled through the lonely mile of Highway 39, Emily felt a wave of loneliness wash over her. The bus ride was usually a time for reflection, but today seemed almost suffocating. She sat in her usual seat by the window, watching the world outside blur past. The trees on either side of the road were leafless now, and the winter sun cast long, dark shadows across the empty landscape. Emily's heart sank as she noticed how similar this desolate scene was to the description she had read about in a recent news article about the local serial killer's favorite hunting grounds. The bus driver, an elderly man with a furrowed face that seemed itched with years of silence and secrets, rarely spoke unless necessary. Today, his presence felt almost ghostly, as if he were a mere shadow himself, haunting Emily's journey through the lonely mile. The passengers, a mix of quiet commuters and insomniacs like herself, all seemed to be absorbed in their own worlds, ignoring the eerie silence that enveloped the bus. Emily found herself staring out at the passing scenery, her mind wandering into dark places she would rather avoid. The more she thought about it, the more unsettling similarities she found between her life and the story of the serial killer who haunted her thoughts. The article had described how the murderer targeted women with similar interests and hobbies to his own, often luring them into traps set on deserted roads like Highway 39. Amy couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched, that the very air around her was thick with a malevolent presence. As the bus approached the halfway point of her journey, the sun began to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows across the road. The landscape became even more desolate, and Emily felt an unnatural chill creeping up her spine. She wrapped her arms around herself, trying to ward off the cold that seemed to be seeping into her bones. Her thoughts were racing, and she found it difficult to focus on anything else but the chilling realization that she might be next. Chapter 2. The Connections. Emily's obsession with the serial killer grew stronger with each passing day. She spent hours researching online, poring over news articles, police reports, and interviews with his victims' families. Every detail seemed to resonate with her own life, making her question whether she was somehow connected to the murderer's twisted past. Her once vibrant world had become a web of shadows, and she couldn't escape the feeling that something dark was lurking just beyond her reach. Her friends and family began to notice the change in her behavior. She became more reclusive, spending hours alone in her room, poring over old photographs and mementos from her childhood. They tried to reach out to her, but their attempts only seemed to push her further into her own world of darkness. Emily couldn't explain it, not even to herself, but she felt a strange connection to the serial killer's crimes that she could not ignore. One night, as she walked home from the library, a phone call disrupted her thoughts. She looked up at the darkened sky, feeling an eerie sense of anticipation as the phone rang in her hand. When she answered, all she heard was one word, mine. The voice was cold and disembodied, like it had been whispered through a hollow tube. Emily's heart raced as she tried to make out any additional information, but the line went dead before she could respond. She couldn't shake the feeling that someone or something was watching her. Her mind raced with possibilities, each more terrifying than the last. She had no idea who was behind the phone call or what their intentions were, but she knew one thing for sure. She needed to find out the truth before it was too late. Emily's determination burned brighter with each passing moment, fueling her need to unravel the mystery that seemed to be each Chinese letter. Chapter 3. The Reflection. Emily's fear and paranoia reached a fever pitch as days turned into weeks. She became consumed by the search for answers, driven by an instinctive need to uncover the truth about the serial killer's crimes and her place within his twisted narrative. Her sleep was plagued by nightmares filled with images of eerie faces, dark corridors, and an unending sense of dread. Her life began to blur at the edges as if she were living in a constant state of limbo between reality and fiction. Strange flashbacks and vivid dreams started to intrude upon her waking hours, leaving her questioning her own sanity. She would wake up with a jolt, feeling disoriented and unable to distinguish where her memories ended and her dreams began. In the midst of this mental turmoil, Emily stumbled across a hidden journal belonging to one of the serial killer's victims. The journal was filled with entries that detailed the young woman's life before her disappearance, her struggles with depression and loneliness, and her unsettling encounters with the murderer. As Emily read the words on the page, she felt a chilling sense of recognition. The stories and emotions described in the journal were eerily similar to her own experiences. The more she read, the more connections she saw between her life and the victim's story. It was as if she had been living in a dark mirror, reflecting the tragic fate that awaited the young woman whose journal she now held in her hands. Emily felt a shiver run down her spine as she realized the horrifying possibility that she might be next. Her heart pounded with fear as she continued to read, hoping to find some clue that would lead her away from this deadly trap. But there was nothing, only more darkness and despair. The journal had revealed a dark secret that connected Emily's past to the crimes of the serial killer, leaving her trapped in a nightmare from which there seemed no escape. And as she closed the cover, Emily knew one thing for certain. She was now caught in the web of shadows, and it was only a matter of time before the murderer would come for her.